research. It really is that part of the doctorate that many of us aspiring clinical psychologists are just like not that enthused by. Because let's face it, it's super academic, it can feel really intimidating for that reason, and fundamentally there are parts of it which are just like, but before we get into that, hello, my name is Miranda and I am your friendly trainee clinical psychologist. And I was thinking, research was definitely the element going into the doctorate that I was most nervous about. So I thought, why not set up a big, fat research DClinPsy Q&A situation so we can just like throw it all out there, air all our issues and figure it out together. So thank you so much for all of you who sent in their questions via Instagram. And if you don't know I have an Instagram, I do now. Go and check me out. Not like that. But yeah, I took all of your questions and did like a little bit of a cheeky thematic analysis and split them all into different groups. So if you have a very specific question, just go into the description box below. I have time-stamped all the different themes so you can find the answer that you're needing. Second of all, if there are questions which you didn't get a chance to ask or you feel like I haven't covered completely, do feel free to just pop them into the comment section below and I will do my best to help you out. So let's get straight into it. Okay, so I've got all your questions all nicely organised. So I've got a couple of questions around the research experience that you need to apply and to get onto the doctorate. So I'm going to use myself as an example because I don't think I'm unique whatsoever in this fact, but my research experience before getting on was extremely light. Like I did my undergraduate degree, I didn't do a master's, I never held a full-time research assistant post or like a proper part-time post. The only like kind of research-y type position that I did was working with 2 different universities, like literally on an hourly basis, like that's how minimal my contribution was, but helping them out doing some like testing, administration type tasks for a couple of the research projects that they had going. That was it. Like I would say, if you've done a master's that has a proper like research component in it, if you've been a research assistant, or if you're in a clinical role where you've been able to do like an audit or a service development project, you've got more than enough. You'll be absolutely fine. Like literally, like close down this video, like you don't need it. If you're in my seat where like the experience is like very thin on the ground, I think what I would say, just like as a little friendly reminder, is that for each of the DClinPsy interviews that I went on, I was asked to design a research project on the spot after being given a research question. Like that literally still sends the fear of God into my spine. So you do need to have like a grasp of how to be able to do that. So knowing the differences between different research designs, like a very light idea of different statistical tests that you can use, but nothing that you can't teach yourself through like a quick read of the Andy Fields textbook, just like pulling out like key concepts. That's about it. The only other caveat that I would say to that is that I know at least of one course, which is King's, which are a bit more specific in terms of the research experience that they want you to show, which is 6 months. Other courses don't specify, so if you don't have that 6 months, then just apply elsewhere. But if you are keen for that course, I'd just say, just as a general rule, always check the requirements for each specific university. I had another couple of questions just asking around the skills that you need when starting the course in terms of research skills and stats. Like, honestly, I would just say be familiar with the basics. Like, all I had was my undergraduate knowledge. Like, to be honest, I didn't refresh at all. So if you were kind of just refreshing on the different sort of research designs, refamiliarizing yourself with like statistical tests, like what you might think about when you're critically evaluating a paper, like knowing how to like pick out strengths and limitations, that's all you need. Like literally, that's all you need. Like if you bother to do all of that before you start training, you did more than I did, so you'll be absolutely fine. Moving on to the course expect you to have an idea of what you want to do in terms of your research projects? no is the short answer. This isn't a PhD. You don't have to have a formulated like research project before you start. So take it easy. Do you get a refresher on the doctorate? Absolutely. So let me just humor me for 1 second. I will show you some of the topics that we cover on the doctorate. So we've got just got some procedural stuff, like nice introductions, you know, what's an audit, CLG, that's like engaging the community in research, and lovely stuff. Here we've got reviewing the literature. Oh, overview of research methodologies. I mean, is that all of the methodologies that you could possibly think of ever in your life? I think it probably is. Qualitative research parts 1 through to 4. Oh, and just to say, like, a lot of these aren't like 1 hour brief slots. It's like a full afternoon of fun. And we're not done yet. So here we've got a little bit of a philosophy of methods. I mean, it's something you never knew you wanted or needed, but it's there. And we've got statistics for that person who said that SPSS is the devil. Well, it's gonna be your friend. We've got statistics 1 all the way through to statistics 9, and each of those lectures ends with a lovely SPSS task. So do you get a refresher? I mean, yes, and then some. Honestly, I think by the time you're like a few weeks into the doctorate, you're gonna be like, okay, that's enough. And I think a cool thing about the doctorate is that you decide your research project so early on that you kind of like, you know whether you're doing quantitative or qual, you know what kind of research, statistical analysis you're gonna do. So like, a lot of this is actually gonna feel surplus to requirements, and you're gonna be like, oh, I'm actually overwhelmed with knowledge. So I think another question that we had was like around getting sufficient help, just around like research when you're on the doctorate, and like, absolutely, we get so much help and support. And I think this was like prefaced really well by one of our professors on our course, is that like, it's very, very, very expensive to train a trainee. I think it costs something like over 200k to get us through our 3 years, like adding everything up and all the like various costs associated to it. Like, they want you to get through. Like, I think once you start training, you'll realize that no one is there, like no one's against you, like they all want to help you. So if you're struggling with something, they're gonna help you out. Like, I found the support that we get around research like amazing. Like, my research team have been super, super responsive, and we get like all the meetings that we need, really. So this is like a little bit tricky to answer just because it does change from year to year, the demands do vary. But in first year, like, honestly, like, I don't think it was so bad. Like, I think it was actually quite cushy on the research front. Not to say that I wasn't stressed at points, I was, but I think that's more just because, like, I was anxious rather than it was hard kind of thing. So what was asked in first year is to meet with supervisors, devise like what your research is going to be, write a research performer, which is basically this quite lengthy, in fairness, document where you have to break down exactly what you're going to do in your research project in terms of like participants, design, methodology, statistical analysis. So like, that definitely requires some thinking and work for sure. And then that will get submitted for an internal review at your university. And then you can think about applying for ethics. And that's like your year done. Like, that's like everything basically that you need to do in terms of your large scale research project in first year. So in terms of like how that divides up, because you've got, at least in my course, you've got 3 placement days and 2 teaching days. Within a month, you get 2 study days that get taken away from your teaching days, if that makes any sense. So theoretically, those 2 days out of the month can be used for like research, kind of academic things that you need to be getting on with. Also, between placements, you usually have a bit of a break. And so like, when we were doing our research pro forma, between our first and second placement, we had that week to like properly write it up. What I do think is a really good thing about the doctorate is that they will build in time for you to do things. Like, it isn't an expectation that you just like do your clinical work, do your teaching, and you do things on top of it. But obviously, like, everyone's gonna have their own opinions on whether that is enough time to do the things that are asked of them. So in second year, I do think I can already feel it heating up. So I've already done like my ethics application, my research project is now open for recruitment. I'm starting to think about my systematic literature review. And so it feels like it's taking up more time, but the way my university organizes it is that they give you like a certain number of research days per term that you can have floating, that you take away from your placement days to be able to get on with stuff. So it hopefully doesn't kind of eat up too much into your time. And then in third year, it gets even more sassy. So the first 3 months in my course, which is different compared to other courses, but the first 3 months are completely dedicated to research. Like, you're not going anywhere, you're not seeing anyone.
You're doing your research project.
So that's where you're sitting down, writing up, submitting your drafts to your supervisors, getting them like revised and things. And then you'll be looking to submit in like the March, April time of your third year, and then doing your viva. So as you can probably tell, like the intensity does hot up as you get closer to qualification. Okay, so I'm going to expand on that time dedicated question by thinking about this. So like your general overview of research on the doctorate. So I suppose your headline element is that large scale research project that we have to do. But it's worth me saying that at the end of it, like in terms of what you need to write, that does look very different from a PhD. So many of you will know, like when you're thinking about a PhD thesis, that's like your big, mammoth, intimidating 100,000 word situation. Like, that is not what we do here. So on the doctorate, you're expected to write up more like journal article format and style pieces of writing. So you'll do one for your empirical paper, so like the thing that you did, the quantitative or qualitative, like your own piece of research on. You will do your systematic review paper, and on my course, we do a reflective piece of writing, like thinking about like the research process and what we've learned and like limitations and strengths, etc. Like there will probably be like little variations from course to course, but like overall that's kind of what the writing demands look like. But that doesn't end there. So there's more research that we need to do. So there is an audit that you have to do on one of your first 4 placements. So you go into your placement, you work with your clinical supervisor, and they will help to identify a service need, and you will do an audit on that. And then in your third year, usually you will do a service related project. So that's kind of anything that falls under the service development banner. Like you might do like a new staff training initiative, you might write a business case for a new post within the service. It really can be quite up to you, and at the end you have to produce this like poster which you then present at a poster party? I don't know, a poster party, let's say. But both of those things, the audit and the service related project, are contained within placement days. So that's quite nice. It doesn't sort of spill over into your free time and evenings. So a little question around the difficulty. So I think we all come in feeling really intimidated about research, but we've got to remember, like, if we're studying at doctoral level and we've been accepted into a highly competitive doctoral program, like, we're not dummies, okay? So I think what's good, like I've showed you, we do get a lot of teaching, a lot of refreshing, a lot of support around this. So I don't think it's necessarily the content that's going to be challenging. What's challenging is kind of like managing your time appropriately. And like, honestly, I think something that's good about the doctorate, as I said, is that you know your research project early on. So if you're like, I'm overwhelmed, you can literally just like put those blinkers on, don't take on any information that you don't need about other research type of designs, other statistical analyses, just focus what you need, get in and get out. Oh, so when I started training, I was like, how do you even pick a topic? So in terms of how I did it, I know my course is a bit different in that, like, the first move, I suppose, is made by the supervisor, in that they will offer kind of like research areas and titles that they would be happy to supervise, because we've got a very active like academic research team. Or if you have like your own hankering and research topic idea, you then know the research interests of the staff that are available and you can match that way. So loads of questions came in terms of like, how much choice do you have? What flexibility do you have in terms of choosing your own topic? And I think there's always going to be a bit of a tension between like your passions and interests, the expertise on your course, and also the time that you have. Like, I thought, like, I really want to make this thing clear because I actually didn't think about it too much until I started training. But like, you've got your first year, which is literally all you're doing is setting like the foundation that you need to start your research project. Like, you're not even getting started. And then if you think in your third year, by April time, you've submitted your papers. Submitted.
It's done.
So that's only a year and a half really that you've got to recruit and do all of those aspects and to write up your papers. It's actually not a very long time. So I think like I definitely had to adjust my expectations in terms of what I could achieve and what would be feasible. I think it's also really important to say that like you could be really, really passionate about like working with a particular client group, but it's important to have the right expertise around you and your research team so that you can do that. So on a research team, there's like you as your like primary investigator. You'll have a primary supervisor and a secondary supervisor. You can also have a field supervisor, so that might be someone who works in the NHS. So that's one way that you can work it, that if you don't have the expertise within the university, that you might be able to find someone within a particular service who can offer you that know-how about the client group or the methodology or what have you that you're particularly interested in. But I think as much as that might feel restrictive, it's actually a much, like, it's much needed. Like, I don't want to be in a research team having the most expertise. Like, if we're in that situation, then like,
honey, we have a problem.
Like, it's really important to like surround yourself with people who can guide you so that it doesn't feel like really scary, but also so that you know that you're like pulling in the right direction and that you are going to produce something that is a publishable standard. In terms of like the variety of the research projects themselves, like honestly, looking at my cohort, like it's so different. Like, we've got people who are doing case series, which are like really specific, like in-depth pieces of work with like 8 participants. Like, I'm doing a factor analysis, which is like an online design with like 140 odd people in psychosis. There are people who are doing a therapeutic intervention as part of their research project, which is really interesting. So they'll actually be delivering therapy that's like new and novel and then evaluating it at the end. Like, there is a lot of variety. So hopefully you won't be disappointed. To keep a decent work-life balance. To be fair, first year I was fine. I was having the best time. I did not work evenings or weekends. Like, I think the match between what you needed to get done and the time you were given to get it done, perfect fit. I thought it was great. And obviously that's going to be more dependent on like your own work rate, how complex you're finding the information, the support that you've got, etc, etc, etc. But I think by and large, like, first year you'll be all right in terms of the research demands. I do feel it's getting a little bit tastier in second year, because that's like when you're doing ethics, and that is just like a ball ache, to be perfectly honest with you. And you're starting recruitment. I think those two things can take up a lot of your time, and you do need to have them like ticking along in the background without necessarily having like blocks of time allocated to do those things. So at my course, like I said, we have these 10 floating days that you can take, so you can like focus on your research stuff, but like I didn't take them, obviously. And that's not to like, I'm really not glorifying working yourself too hard, like that's not my business. But I think like you have to take those research days away from your placement days. And research versus clinical stuff, like, I have a clear favourite, it is no secret, and so I kind of made that sort of weird decision in my head not to do it. And long story short, I shot myself in the foot because I ended up working weekends and evenings. But I've got past that, and I think it's kind of more the challenge of trying to keep things like rolling in the back burner, which is difficult to have things ticking along, because without the time built in, you can pass like several weeks without touching research at all, and that's the spot that you don't want to get yourself into. Because in third year you do have more time allocated, but really you just want to be like writing things up at that point. You don't want to be like scrabbling around trying to find participants. So I think second year is a little bit more complex in terms of like striking the right balance. I think this moves me on quite nicely in terms of like how to stay on top of research, like on top of the other demands, because that's definitely, I think, the biggest challenge of the DClin side, just like managing everything. And I would say, take the time that's given to you. And also what I'm trying to do, like in terms of recruitment, is to set myself a task that I do every single working day in order to keep things like simmering as they should be. So like I need quite big numbers for my research, so I'm making sure that every day I'm making some kind of contact, whether I'm like emailing someone or like sharing a tweet or whatever, every single day, so it's ticking along, so I don't have like these great stretches of time where I'm doing nothing. So if you can find an equivalent of that for you, where you do something which takes like 20 minutes every single day that you're just adding on top, especially if you don't have like times built into your calendar to do research, I think that's really helpful to make sure that you don't get into this like hideous work cloud situation. Okay, so question around what to say to a potential supervisor in the first meeting. Like, first of all, I would just go in there like information gathering. This is like a non-commitment, non-stressful situation. Trying to understand more about like where they're coming from in terms of their research interests, like projects, things that they've supervised. Also an opportunity for you to talk about like where you're coming from in terms of your experience and the idea that you have, and just kind of like trying to like negotiate and flesh out those types of topics. Like, gather as much information as you want, that's absolutely fine, but I think what's most important is like figure out the vibe, okay? Because with research, there's gonna come a time where you hate it. Like, I feel like I crossed that line just before Christmas when I was doing my ethics proposal. Like, I fell into a deep pool of hate. And I think you just want a supervisor who's gonna be cool as a cucumber, available, straight talking, a safe pair of hands that you know that you can work with, especially in those like high intensity, stressful situations. Like, is this someone that you would like have a conversation with outside of your research project and not feel like you need to make a quick exit? Like that's a good measure, I feel. Once you've decided on the supervisor, so something that we did at the very beginning was setting out this research contract. So that's basically like where you both get an opportunity to talk about like how you like to work and what your expectations are of the other person, like how often you're going to meet, things like that, which I think is really, really important. Opportunities for your supervisor to say like,
this is your project and this is your responsibility. And
my rebuttal to be like,
I have no research experience, please guide me.
So important conversations all round. I think moving on to, is my supervisor supportive? 100%, like absolutely. I really feel like my supervisor is such a safe pair of hands. Like, she is a professor extraordinaire in psychosis, and so has so much expertise, has supervised so many different projects. So I do feel like she's a person who's going to help me to get over the line, and like never seems to like freak out about anything, and never makes me feel like I'm asking dumb questions when like sometimes I am definitely asking dumb questions. I think, the main thing is, well, not the main thing, but something to consider is that like you want to get something and you want to produce something that is publishable standard, and that's not just for you, that's also going to be great for your supervisor as well, because they get to stick their name on it. Like, everyone's a winner if it goes well. So I think, you're more often than not, you're going to have people who are on your side willing to help you, and that's definitely been the case for me. Okay, so I had a few questions which like didn't neatly fit into any category, which was just, but we move. Okay, so is there an expectation to publish? Absolutely. So for research to be of doctoral standard, it also needs to be of publishable standard. So those two things go hand in hand. But also what you write up at the end, like I said, you're already in journal format, so you're kind of pretty much ready to go, ready to just like present for publication. Absolutely. But I think also from an ethical standpoint, you've asked for people's time, and you also within your research process, you will have like stumbled across something interesting, discovered something, reflected on something which merits being shared and disseminated. So absolutely yes to that. Are they supportive of participatory action research? I'm sure, I mean, I would assume so. I mean, I can't think of a project in my year group which like fits into that in its like definition form. But with that said, you know, my university are really keen on involvement from the community. We've got a whole liaison group which is set up to do just that, and to advise on different projects and like how, you know, questions sound to participants, things that we haven't considered, to make sure that it's like palatable, safe and ethical for everyone who participates. So I don't see why there would be any problems with that, to be honest. And finally, I just thought this was funny. Did they eventually realise that most of us just winged it at interview by pretending we were totally the bee's knees at quantitative research? Yes, I'm sure that is the case, but they're being very gracious about it if so, so I feel like we're all winning. Okay, that rounds me up for the big fat research DClinPsy Q&A. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for listening. Like I said, if there was any questions which I didn't cover, please do shoot them in the comments section below. But I will just leave you to chew on that. Enjoy, fellow research friends, and I will look forward to speaking to you next week. Take care. Ciao for now.